They say wisdom comes with age, but for Agnes, a woman on the cusp of 60, it often felt like a cruel joke, a quiet whisper that the world mistook for the onset of senility. For 7 long years, she had meticulously crafted a public persona of a fading tech visionary, a once brilliant mind now prone to losing it, as her ambitious junior partner Mark so gleefully put it. None of them, not Mark, nor the glittering array of industry titans gathered in her opulent penthouse, realized they were all, in some way, working for the very empire she had secretly built from the ashes of a brutal betrayal. That night, as she watched Mark regale their esteemed guests with exaggerated tales of her supposed mental decline, over vintage champagne she had discreetly paid for, Agnes knew his carefully constructed world was finally crumbling. She sat quietly at the edge of her plush velvet sofa, nursing a glass of sparkling water, the effervescence a stark contrast to the bitter taste of their condescension, as the sound of their forced laughter echoed through her minimalist, art-filled living space. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a breathtaking panorama of Manila's sprawling urban tapestry, creating an almost theatrical backdrop for the scene unfolding before Agnes. This wasn't just another one of her infrequent, carefully curated dinner parties. It was a strategic maneuver, a final act in a play she had been directing for nearly a decade. Mark, her supposed protégé, and the current public face of their joint venture, Apex Innovations, was holding court. He stood by the grand piano, a picture of youthful confidence in his bespoke suit, his silver tongue weaving narratives of Agnes's eccentricities and lapses in judgment with practiced ease. His audience, a collection of venture capitalists, tech CEOs, and influential media personalities, hung on his every word, their expressions a mix of polite amusement and thinly veiled pity directed at Agnes. Agnes, a woman whose sharp intellect had once commanded boardrooms across Silicon Valley, now played the role of the slightly senile, benevolent figurehead, a relic of a bygone era. Her silver hair, meticulously styled, framed a face etched with the wisdom of countless battles fought and won, though tonight, it was carefully composed to convey a gentle, almost bewildered air. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, chosen specifically to blend into the background, to allow Mark to shine, to allow him to dig his own grave. Her hands, still capable of coding complex algorithms in her private sanctum, rested calmly in her lap, belying the storm of calculations raging within her mind. "You know," Mark chuckled, raising his glass, the clinking of ice a punctuation mark to his performance. "Just last week, Agnes here was convinced our new AI prototype was trying to communicate with her through the coffee machine. Said it was, quote, sending subtle messages about market trends." A ripple of laughter, carefully suppressed but undeniably there, spread through the room. Agnes offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a master of her craft. The irony was so profound it almost made her laugh out loud. That AI prototype was her brainchild, a revolutionary predictive analytics system, and yes, she had indeed programmed it to send her real-time, nuanced market insights through an encrypted app disguised as a coffee machine interface. It was a private joke, a testament to her ingenuity, now twisted into a public mockery. Victoria, a slick, ambitious young woman who served as Apex Innovations' head of investor relations, a position Agnes had, in fact, created for her, and for which she was now grossly overpaid, leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with feigned concern. "Oh, Agnes, darling, you must be so tired. All those years at the top, it takes its toll, doesn't it?" Her voice, though sweet, carried an undertone of barely concealed triumph. She was a product of Mark's inner circle, a sycophant who believed her future was inextricably linked to his ascent. Agnes had observed Victoria's ruthlessness, her casual disregard for ethical boundaries, and had filed it away, another piece of evidence in the intricate puzzle she had been assembling. David, the chief financial officer, a man whose loyalty Agnes had once mistakenly trusted, nearly choked on his artisanal cocktail. "Indeed, Mark. Remember when she insisted on investing in that obscure blockchain startup? Said it was the, quote, future of decentralized finance. We almost had a heart attack trying to talk her out of it." More laughter, louder this time. David, with his meticulously groomed beard and designer spectacles, was a caricature of corporate arrogance. He had no idea that the obscure blockchain startup was actually a shell company Agnes owned, which had just secured a $75 million Series B funding round, making it one of the fastest-growing fintech companies in Asia. The heart attack he referred to was his attempt to divert Apex's funds into a failing venture he secretly had a stake in, a move Agnes had deftly blocked while making it appear as a concession to his, quote, superior financial acumen. Agnes's former assistant, Clara, now Mark's executive aide, patted David's arm solicitously, as if he'd just delivered a devastatingly witty punchline. "Agnes has always had interesting ideas," Clara chimed in, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Remember last month when she thought she could secure that partnership with Quantum Dynamics? She was so convinced they'd see her vision." Clara turned to the group, eager to share another tale of Agnes's supposed incompetence. What Clara didn't know was that Agnes owned Quantum Dynamics through a complex web of holding companies, and that failed meeting Clara loved to mock was actually Agnes's quarterly undercover assessment of their partnership potential. The multi-million-dollar deal, which Clara thought Agnes had lost, had been signed yesterday, tucked away in Agnes's private digital safe, along with other documents that would soon change everything. "At least she's persistent," Victoria chimed in, her voice thick with condescension, smoothing the expensive silk of her dress, paid for by the very company she thought she was offering Agnes entry-level advisory work at. "Though maybe it's time to consider something more realistic. We're actually looking for a new senior advisor for legacy projects at Apex. It's mostly ceremonial, of course, but it would keep her busy." More poorly concealed snickers. Even the new guest, Robert, a renowned tech journalist whom Agnes had secretly funded to launch his independent online publication, joined in, oblivious to the true power dynamics at play. "There's no shame in honest, less demanding work, Agnes," he offered, as if throwing a lifeline to a drowning woman. Agnes took another sip of her sparkling water, letting the cool liquid wash away the words she wanted to unleash. Through the corner of her eye, she caught Mark's subtle smirk, the one he thought she didn't notice, the one that said, "I finally got her right where I want her." The same smirk he'd been giving for years, each time more dismissive than the last. The irony was a gourmet meal, savored slowly. Every person in this room, from the high-flying investors to the seemingly loyal executives, worked for her. Every lucrative contract they bragged about, every bonus they flaunted, every corporate achievement they prided themselves on, it all came from the company she had built from nothing. Apex Innovations, now valued at over $3 billion, was her creation, her empire, hidden behind layers of shell corporations and meticulous corporate structuring. Tomorrow, at exactly 9 a.m., their perfectly curated world would shatter. But for now, she sat quietly, playing the role of the aging, slightly addled founder, the subject of their cruel jokes. Let them laugh, she thought. In less than 24 hours, the same people who mockingly offered her ceremonial positions would be reading their termination letters in her boardroom. "Agnes, darling," Mark called out again, his voice carrying that familiar note of public sympathy that barely masked his disdain. "Be a dear and tell everyone about that time you tried to pitch a mind-reading app to our biggest client. They almost called security." He smiled at Victoria, both of them sharing a knowing look, completely unaware that the promotion papers sitting on Victoria's desk would never be signed. If only they knew that promotion would never come. Agnes stood up, her movements unhurried, measured. She had to fetch more champagne, a task usually reserved for the staff, but tonight, it was part of her performance. Behind her, their laughter continued, but all she could hear was the ticking clock, counting down to their reckoning. As she descended the stairs to the wine cellar, a discreet, soundproof sanctuary beneath the penthouse, she allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Just a few more hours of playing the fool, and then everything would change. The wine cellar's soft, amber lighting cast long shadows as Agnes selected a bottle of 1998 Chateau Lafite Rothschild, a $7,000 wine Mark believed he'd purchased with his executive bonus. In reality, it was part of Agnes's private collection, each bottle carefully chosen to maintain their facade of Apex's success being a joint effort. As she gripped the bottle's neck, memories of this morning's executive meeting flooded back. She had sat there, disguised as a consultant from a minor auditing firm, watching Mark present his latest strategic vision. The same Mark who now sat upstairs mocking her career choices had completely butchered the presentation, proposing a campaign that would have cost Apex Innovations millions in potential revenue and market share. Yet he stood there, confident and arrogant, dismissing concerns from junior staff members with the same condescending tone he used with her. He had even, at one point, scoffed at a suggestion from a young female engineer, a brilliant mind Agnes had secretly scouted and mentored, claiming it was too idealistic and lacking commercial viability. Agnes had made a mental note to promote that engineer the very next day. Making her way back upstairs, the sounds of the party grew louder. She caught the tail end of what must have been another joke at her expense. Mark's laughter, sharp and theatrical, cut through the air. "Oh God, you should have seen her at the investor meetup last week. She actually thought she could convince them to fund her revolutionary software platform for checks notes, interdimensional communication." David, already on his fourth glass of wine, leaned forward eagerly. "Don't tell me another rejection." His words slightly slurred, but his mockery remained precise. "She didn't even make it past the reception desk," Mark continued, his eyes glinting with malicious amusement. The secretary took one look at her proposal and suggested she try a local community college instead. More uproarious laughter erupted. What they didn't know was that the investor meetup had been at one of Agnes's subsidiary companies, Cosmic Ventures, a venture capital firm she had founded specifically to fund high-risk, high-reward projects that traditional firms dismissed. The receptionist, Sarah, was actually Agnes's head of investor relations, playing along with their carefully orchestrated charade. The rejection had been a cover for a $200 million acquisition deal Agnes had finalized that afternoon, securing a groundbreaking patent for a quantum computing breakthrough. The interdimensional communication app was a highly advanced encrypted network for secure global data transfer, a project so cutting-edge it would revolutionize cybersecurity. "Here's the champagne," Agnes said quietly, placing the bottle on the polished marble coffee table. Victoria immediately reached for it, examining the label with exaggerated expertise. "Oh, Mark, darling, this is exquisite," she cooed. "The 98 Lafite! You really know how to celebrate." She shot Agnes a sideways glance. "Though I suppose when one of us has to be the breadwinner," Mark preened under the praise. "Well, someone has to maintain our lifestyle. God knows Agnes isn't going to do it with her endless string of failed ventures." He turned to Agnes, his voice honey-sweet, but laced with venom. "Sweetheart, why don't you tell everyone about your latest rejection email? The one from Phoenix Digital?" Agnes's stomach tightened, not from embarrassment but from controlled anger. Phoenix Digital was another company she owned, a leading AI development firm, and the rejection email had been crafted by her team to maintain her cover. She forced her face to flush, playing the part of the humiliated founder perfectly. "I'd rather not discuss it," she mumbled, exactly as they expected her to. Clara, eager to join the feeding frenzy, jumped in. "You know, Agnes, my 20-year-old nephew just started learning basic coding. Maybe he could give you some tips?" The room dissolved into laughter again. Agnes watched as Mark basked in the attention, his perfectly manicured hand resting on Victoria's arm as they shared another knowing look. These dinner parties had become his stage, and Agnes was his favorite prop. The aging, out-of-touch founder he so nobly tolerated. "Remember when she tried to pitch to Anderson Corp last year?" David interjected, clearly enjoying himself. "God, what a disaster that must have been." Mark's eyes lit up at the memory. "Oh, you don't know the half of it. She spent weeks preparing, bought a new suit and everything." He paused for dramatic effect. "They didn't even let her finish her presentation. The CEO practically laughed her out of the building." The truth? Agnes owned Anderson Corp through a shell company. And that meeting had been her quarterly review of the management team's treatment of potential partners. The CEO had been fired the next day for his unprofessional behavior, though the real reason never made it to the press. As the night wore on, the champagne flowed freely and their inhibitions lowered further. Each story became more elaborate, each laugh more cutting. Agnes sat there, playing her part, offering weak smiles and awkward silences exactly when they expected them. "Agnes, darling," Mark called out again, his voice carrying that familiar note of public sympathy that barely masked his disdain. "Why don't you go check if we have any more of those artisanal chocolates left, the ones I brought back from my Geneva business trip?" The Geneva trip, another piece of carefully crafted fiction. The chocolates, like everything else in their luxury penthouse, had been purchased with Agnes's money, through one of the many accounts Mark knew nothing about. As Agnes stood to fetch them, Victoria's voice followed her to the kitchen. "Really, Mark, you're a saint for putting up with all this. I don't know how you do it. If my business partner was such a, well, you know." Agnes opened the kitchen cabinet, retrieving the gold-embossed box of chocolates, her hands steady despite the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. In less than 12 hours, their perfectly constructed world would come crashing down. Let them have their laughs tonight. Tomorrow, the real show would begin. As she arranged the chocolates on a crystal platter, another item Mark believed he'd purchased with his year-end bonus, her mind drifted back to the moment that set this entire plan in motion. 7 years ago, she wasn't just Agnes, the fading founder. She was Agnes Moreau, a brilliant software architect with a vision that would revolutionize global logistics. Back then, she worked at one of the largest tech conglomerates in Europe, leading their advanced R&D department. She had everything: respect, recognition, and a corner office with a panoramic view of the Swiss Alps. But she also had something else, an idea that would change the industry forever. She'd spent years developing an AI-driven platform that could predict and optimize supply chain disruptions before they occurred, a system far more advanced than anything on the market. When she presented her idea to the board, they didn't just reject it, they tried to steal it. She discovered their plans to patent her technology under the company's name, cutting her out entirely. The betrayal was swift and brutal. Within weeks, she was forced out on trumped-up charges of corporate espionage, her reputation in tatters. That's when she learned her first real lesson about power. It's not about who you are, it's about who people think you are. She retreated to a small, nondescript apartment in the bustling heart of Manila, living off her meticulously saved offshore funds while she plotted her next move. The global tech community had blacklisted her, believing the lies spread by her former employers. Every door seemed closed, except one. If they wanted to see her as a failure, an aging, senile woman, she'd use that perception to her advantage. During those early days, she met Mark at a local tech incubator, where she was volunteering, playing the part of a struggling, retired entrepreneur, offering pro bono advice. He was there representing his fledgling startup, radiating youthful confidence and raw ambition. What caught her attention wasn't his charm or his seemingly innovative ideas. It was the way he treated people he deemed beneath him. She watched as he dismissed service staff, belittled junior developers, and networked aggressively with anyone he thought could advance his career. He was the perfect embodiment of the corporate culture she despised, yet he represented an unexpected opportunity. "You have potential, Agnes," he had told her on their third meeting, his voice dripping with condescension. "You just need someone with modern vision to guide you." Little did he know, she was already building apex innovations through a complex web of shell companies and silent partnerships. The early days of Apex were grueling. She worked through nights in her small home office, a converted storage room in her first Manila apartment, while Mark thought she was tinkering with another hopeless hobby project. Every failure he mocked was actually a carefully orchestrated step towards success. Every rejected proposal he ridiculed was a cover for major business deals she was closing. She used his network, his connections, watching as he inadvertently introduced her to people who would become key players in her company. His friend Victoria, who would later become Apex's marketing director, once spent an entire dinner party explaining basic marketing concepts to Agnes, completely unaware that Agnes was evaluating her for the very position she would eventually hold, assessing her vulnerabilities and her eagerness for power. The real turning point came 4 years ago, when her advanced logistics platform caught the attention of major industry players. While Mark attended lavish industry events and boasted about his own brilliant strategies, Agnes was secretly closing deals worth hundreds of millions, expanding Apex's reach globally. She remembered the night Mark came home excited about his new job opportunity at Apex Innovations. "Finally," he had said, "a chance to work with a real company, a company with my vision." The irony was exquisite. He had no idea he was interviewing for a position in her company, nor that his entire department had been created specifically to maintain her cover, to give him a stage to perform on, while she pulled the strings from the shadows. Through it all, she kept her late father's words close to heart. He had been a humble watchmaker in her small hometown, working 18-hour days to give her an education. "Success isn't about making noise, Agnes," he would say, his hands steady as he meticulously assembled tiny gears. "It's about building something so solid that no one can tear it down." When he passed away 5 years ago, Mark had complained about taking time off work to attend the funeral. "It's not like it was anybody important," he had said, not knowing that her father's small savings, meticulously accumulated over decades, had provided the seed money for what would become Apex Innovations. That comment had sealed Mark's fate. It wasn't just about business anymore, it was about justice. Every laugh, every mockery, every dismissive comment since then had been carefully documented, added to the growing file that would eventually lead to this moment. Standing in her kitchen now, listening to the continued laughter from the living room, Agnes felt a calm certainty. Tomorrow, when she finally revealed herself as the true owner of Apex Innovations, it wouldn't just be about exposing their incompetence or punishing their cruelty. It would be about showing them that true power doesn't need to announce itself. She checked her watch, 10:30 p.m. In less than 11 hours, everything would change. The termination papers were ready, the security teams briefed, and the board members notified of an emergency meeting. Soon they would all learn what Agnes had known for years. Sometimes, the biggest power lies in being underestimated. Picking up the chocolate platter, she straightened her shoulders and prepared to return to her role as the disappointing, slightly confused founder for one last time. Tomorrow, they would learn the truth. But tonight, she would let them enjoy their final moments of perceived superiority. Agnes returned to the living room with the chocolate platter, where the atmosphere had grown even more toxic. The combination of expensive champagne and unchecked arrogance had removed what little filter Mark and his circle typically maintained. Mark sat perched on the arm of Victoria's chair, both of them scrolling through something on Victoria's phone, occasionally bursting into poorly suppressed giggles. "Oh my God, look at this one!" Victoria exclaimed, turning her phone to show the others. "Agnes's old LinkedIn profile. Can we talk about these entrepreneurial achievements she's listed?" She cleared her throat dramatically, preparing to read aloud. Agnes's jaw tightened imperceptibly. The LinkedIn profile was entirely fabricated, of course, part of her carefully constructed facade. Every failed venture, every exaggerated claim, was meticulously crafted to maintain her cover while she built Apex Innovations from the shadows. Innovative problem solver with a track record of identifying market opportunities. Victoria read, her voice dripping with mockery. Market opportunities? The only opportunity she's identified is letting Mark take over the company so she doesn't have to bother with reality. Mark preened at the backhanded compliment, running his fingers through his expensively highlighted hair. "Sometimes I wonder if she actually believes her own hype. Just last week she was telling me about some revolutionary algorithm she's developed, something about supply chain optimization she called it." Agnes placed the chocolates on the coffee table, her movements deliberate and controlled. That algorithm was actually the cornerstone of Apex's success, currently generating hundreds of millions in revenue. The patent papers sat in her private safe, along with documentation of every snide comment and dismissive gesture she'd endured over the years. David, now visibly drunk, grabbed a chocolate and leaned forward conspiratorially. "You know what? I heard someone from her old company told me she was fired for trying to steal proprietary technology. Can you imagine? She couldn't even do corporate espionage right." The room erupted in laughter, but Agnes caught the flash of something darker in Mark's eyes. "Really?" he said, his interest piqued. "She told me she left voluntarily to pursue her own ventures." He turned to Agnes, his smile sharp as a blade. "Care to explain the discrepancy, darling?" Agnes shifted uncomfortably in her seat, playing her part perfectly. "It was a misunderstanding," she mumbled, knowing this would only fuel their amusement. She wasn't wrong. "A misunderstanding?" Clara exclaimed, nearly spilling her champagne. "That's what my teenage son says when he gets caught sneaking out. At least he has the excuse of being 17. Victoria leaned back, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "You know, Mark, I've never asked. How did you two even meet? I mean, you're so—" She gestured vaguely at Mark's sharp suit and perfectly groomed appearance. "And she— so—" "It was at a tech conference," Mark supplied, his tone suggesting he was sharing a particularly amusing anecdote. "She was working as a volunteer, if you can believe it, handing out name badges and setting up chairs." What Mark didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Agnes had specifically chosen that conference because she knew he would be there. She had already identified Apex's future key players, and Mark's position at his previous company made him the perfect, unwitting accomplice in her plan. "I thought I could help her," Mark continued, his voice taking on a theatrical tone of martyrdom. "She seemed so earnest, so convinced she could be something. I suppose that's what I get for trying to save someone from themselves." David's wife, Sarah, who had been relatively quiet until now, chimed in. "It's not too late, you know, to start over. I mean, how long can you keep supporting someone who clearly isn't going to change?" Agnes watched as Mark's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "Believe me," he said softly, "I've been thinking about that a lot lately." He shot Agnes a look that was meant to wound. "There's only so long you can watch someone waste their potential before you have to admit they never had any to begin with." The room fell into a heavy silence, the kind that follows when a private thought has been voiced too publicly. Agnes could feel their eyes on her, waiting for a reaction, expecting her to defend herself or slink away in shame. Instead, she checked her watch. 11:15 p.m. "I think I'll head up to bed," Agnes said quietly, playing the part of the defeated founder one last time. "Big day tomorrow." This earned another round of snickers. They assumed she was referring to yet another doomed job interview or pitiful startup attempt. Mark waved his hand dismissively. Yes, your mysterious morning meeting. Try not to embarrass yourself too much this time." More laughter followed her as she stood. As she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, she could hear Victoria's voice carrying from below. "Seriously, Mark, you're a saint. I don't know how you do it. If my business partner was such a, well, you know." Agnes closed the bedroom door behind her, finally allowing herself a small smile. In less than 10 hours, they would all understand exactly how Mark did it, by unknowingly living off the success of the very woman they mocked. She walked to the window, looking out over the city skyline that housed the headquarters of her empire. Tomorrow, their laughter would stop. Tomorrow, they would learn that every luxury they enjoyed, every promotion they celebrated, every achievement they claimed, had been orchestrated by the woman they thought was a failure. But for now, she had one last night of preparation ahead of her. She pulled out her phone and sent a final text to Sarah, her trusted executive assistant, the real one, not the performative assistant from the party. "Everything ready for tomorrow?" Her response came immediately. "All set. Security briefed. Board members notified. Files prepared. Perfect." In the quiet sanctuary of her home office, disguised as her hobby room, where Mark thought she spent hours playing with worthless startup ideas, Agnes began her final preparations. The space looked deliberately messy. Scattered papers, outdated programming books, and a whiteboard filled with amateurish business plans. It was all part of the facade, a carefully constructed image of failed ambition. Behind the false wall panel, however, sat her real workstation. 3 high-resolution monitors sprung to life as she entered her security code, displaying real-time data from Apex Innovations' global operations. She pulled up the files she'd been meticulously compiling for years, each one a nail in the coffin of their careers. First was Victoria's file. As head of investor relations, she'd been embezzling company funds for months, disguising personal expenses as marketing research. 5-star hotel stays, luxury spa weekends, even her designer wardrobe, all charged to the company under cleverly coded expense reports. The forensic accounting team had documented everything, building an airtight case for termination. "Playing with your little projects again?" Mark's voice floated up from downstairs, followed by more laughter. Agnes smiled faintly as she pulled up his personnel file. Mark's transgressions were even more serious. As the public CEO, he'd been manipulating quarterly reports, inflating numbers to secure larger bonuses, and attract more investor capital for himself. What he didn't know was that every fraudulent entry had been flagged, every deceptive calculation documented. The financial regulatory authorities would be particularly interested in some of his creative accounting practices and dubious investment schemes. Agnes opened her secure email and sent final confirmations to the security team. Tomorrow, access cards would be deactivated, emails suspended, and personal belongings packed before they even arrived at the office. Everything had to be timed perfectly. Clara's husband, Michael, despite being newer to the company through Mark's connections, had already managed to compromise himself. His attempts to sell company secrets to competitors had been monitored from day one. The evidence was damning. Recorded conversations, copied emails, documented meetings. His termination would be accompanied by legal action. A soft knock at the door made Agnes quickly switch screens. "Come in," she called out, knowing it would be Mark. He entered with that familiar look of disdain, surveying what he thought was just another room full of failed dreams. "We're wrapping up downstairs," he said, leaning against the door frame. "Though I don't know why I'm telling you, since you're hiding up here as usual." His words were slightly slurred from the champagne, but his contempt remained sharp. Agnes nodded meekly, playing her part. "Just finishing up some research," she murmured. He laughed, high and cruel. "Research, right. You know, Victoria made an excellent point tonight. There comes a time when you have to stop chasing fantasies and face reality." If only he knew the reality that awaited him tomorrow. Behind her, on her hidden monitors, Agnes could see the final pieces falling into place. The board members had confirmed their attendance for tomorrow's emergency meeting, security protocols were set, legal teams were standing by. "Maybe you're right," Agnes said softly, watching his eyes narrow in surprise. He hadn't expected agreement. "Well," he said, somehow managing to make the single word drip with condescension. "Miracles do happen. Try not to stay up all night with your little projects. Some of us have real work tomorrow." As he closed the door, Agnes turned back to her preparations. She pulled up the final set of documents, the ones that would hit closest to home. Mark's own involvement in company misconduct was well documented. His unauthorized sharing of confidential information with rival firms, his abuse of expense accounts, and his harassment of junior staff members, particularly the young female engineer he had ridiculed earlier. All of it carefully recorded. But the most damning evidence had nothing to do with work. Agnes opened a folder containing surveillance photos, text messages, and hotel receipts. Mark's carefully hidden affair with a senior executive at a competing firm had been documented for months. Every secret meeting, every encrypted message, every lie he told about working late, all of it preserved in high-resolution detail. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Agnes checked the time, 12:30 a.m. In less than 9 hours, their world would implode. She began the final system checks, ensuring every piece of evidence was properly backed up and accessible. The security team confirmed their positions for tomorrow. Legal had prepared individual packets for each termination, complete with non-disclosure agreements and clear documentation of cause. One by one, she reviewed their personnel files one last time. Victoria Martinez, head of investor relations, terminated for financial misconduct and misappropriation of company funds. Mark Sterling, CEO, public-facing, terminated for securities fraud, falsification of financial records, and gross negligence. Michael Roberts, VP of Operations, Clara's husband, terminated for corporate espionage and breach of contract. Each termination had been carefully crafted to be both legally unassailable and professionally devastating. They wouldn't just lose their jobs. They would become unhireable in their fields. Agnes sent one final email to her executive assistant. Initiate Protocol Alpha at 8:45 a.m. No exceptions, no delays. Her response was immediate. Understood. All teams in position. Standing up from her desk, Agnes took one last look at the evidence of their arrogance and cruelty. Years of mockery, condescension, and betrayal had led to this moment. Tomorrow, they would learn that the woman they ridiculed had been watching, waiting, and building their downfall, brick by brick. She shut down the hidden system and closed the false panel, looking around at the deliberately messy hobby room. She allowed herself a moment of appreciation for the role she'd played. The scattered papers, the amateurish diagrams, the outdated technology, all of it had served its purpose perfectly. Tomorrow, the mask would finally come off. But tonight, she had one last part to play. The defeated, aging founder, going to bed with another failure hanging over her head. If only they knew what kind of success awaited them in the morning. As Agnes lay in bed, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside her, she thought about how this would be the last night of their charade. He had come to bed without a word, turning his back to her, his usual way of showing disapproval. The expensive silk pajamas he wore, like everything else, had been bought with Agnes's money, though he believed they were the fruits of his own success. The digital clock on the nightstand showed 1:45 a.m. Sleep wouldn't come easily tonight, but that was fine. She had spent countless nights like this over the past 7 years, lying awake, playing every angle, building her empire from the shadows while maintaining the facade of mediocrity. Her phone buzzed softly. Another update from Sarah, her executive assistant. Final security briefing complete. All teams in position for tomorrow. Lockdown protocols ready. Agnes responded with a simple, confirmed, before deleting the exchange, a habit born from years of careful deception. Mark stirred beside her, murmuring something in his sleep. Even unconscious, he managed to sound self-important. The dinner party's events played through her mind, each mockery, each snide comment adding fuel to tomorrow's fire. But it was his final words of the evening that truly crystallized everything. She had overheard him in the kitchen, speaking to Victoria in what he thought was a private moment. "I've already talked to my lawyers," he had said, referring to his plan to sideline Agnes completely and take full control of Apex. They say with Agnes's track record of decline, I could easily assume full executive power. After all, what board would believe she contributed anything to our success? Victoria's response had been equally cruel. Finally, honestly, Mark, you've wasted enough time humoring her, though I have to admit, watching her fumble through life has been entertaining. I'm formalizing the restructure next week, Mark had continued, unaware that his every word was being recorded by the hidden security systems Agnes had installed throughout the penthouse. I've already moved most of my personal investments to a new private fund. Not that Agnes would notice. She's too busy with her pathetic attempts at quantum entanglement. The irony was almost poetic. The private fund he had mentioned was actually one of Agnes's shell companies, designed specifically to track his financial maneuvers. Every dollar he thought he was hiding was actually being monitored, documented, and added to the evidence that would be presented tomorrow. Agnes turned to look at his sleeping form, remembering the day they met. Back then, she had seen his ambition as an asset, his social climbing as a tool she could use. She never expected to feel anything real for him, but somewhere along the way, she had hoped he might prove to be more than just a means to an end. That hope had died the day of her father's funeral. While Agnes grieved the man who had sacrificed everything to give her an education, Mark had complained about missing an important networking event. "It's not like your father was anyone important," he had said, checking his watch impatiently. "Just a watchmaker who couldn't think bigger than his little shop." He couldn't have known that his words would set in motion the final phase of Agnes's plan. That little watchmaker's shop had provided the seed money for what would become Apex Innovations. Her father's lessons about patience, about building something lasting, had shaped every decision she'd made. Her phone buzzed again, another message, this time from building security. Mr. Sterling's private meeting with Ms. Dubois from rival firm canceled for tomorrow, so he had planned to meet his lover, even on what would become the most significant day of his life. The surveillance photos of their previous encounters would make an interesting addition to tomorrow's revelations. Devi Bia. Agnes got up quietly, walking to the window. The city sprawled out below, a maze of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there, Mark, Victoria, and the others were sleeping peacefully, unaware that their comfortable lives were about to implode. Their careers, their reputations, their carefully constructed facades, all of it would crumble in a matter of hours. Checking her watch again, 2:30 a.m., Agnes moved to the ensuite bathroom, splashing cold water on her face. The woman in the mirror looked tired, but her eyes held a steely determination. For years she had maintained the image of a defeated dreamer, absorbing their ridicule with seemingly endless patience. That patience had run out. She returned to the bedroom, where Mark had shifted in his sleep, his expensive silk pajamas twisted around him. The same pajamas he had bought to celebrate his supposed promotion, a promotion Agnes had deliberately orchestrated to maintain their charade. Tomorrow he would learn the truth about every aspect of his life, his job, his perceived success, his future. The final pieces were in place. The board members had been quietly briefed, the security teams positioned, and the evidence compiled. In just a few hours, the carefully constructed world of Mark and his friends would shatter, revealing the truth they had been too arrogant to see. Agnes lay back down, her mind racing through the sequence of events to come. By this time tomorrow, everything would be different. The woman they had mocked, belittled, and underestimated would be revealed as the architect of their downfall. As she finally drifted towards sleep, Mark's words from earlier echoed in her mind. Some of us have real work tomorrow. He had no idea just how real tomorrow's work would be. The time for hiding, for playing the fool, was almost over. The countdown to their reckoning had begun. The morning dawned crisp and clear, perfect for what was about to unfold. Agnes woke at precisely 5:30 a.m., long before Mark would stir. In the walk-in closet, hidden behind her deliberately modest collection of off-the-rack suits, she retrieved the custom-tailored power suit she'd been saving for this day. Dark navy, impeccably cut, the armor of a CEO, not the costume of a fading visionary. Mark was still asleep when she emerged from the bathroom, fully dressed and groomed. She allowed herself a moment to study his sleeping form, mentally preparing for the shock that would soon replace his usual smug expression. The luxury watch he wore to bed, another gift he attributed to his own success, caught the early morning light. "Going somewhere?" His groggy voice startled her. He propped himself up on one elbow, eyeing her attire with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Another big meeting? Something like that," Agnes replied softly, adjusting her platinum cufflinks. Accessories she'd kept hidden away until now. He sat up fully, his brow furrowing. Is that a new suit?" The confusion in his voice was evident. In his mind, Agnes couldn't afford designer clothing. "I've had it for a while," she said truthfully, "just waiting for the right moment." Mark's laugh was sharp, cutting through the morning quiet. "The right moment, Agnes? It's barely 6 a.m. What could possibly be so important that you're dressed like?" He gestured vaguely at her appearance. "This. You'll find out soon enough," Agnes replied, checking her phone. Sarah had already sent the morning briefing. All systems go. Security in position. Board members arriving early as requested. "Whatever," Mark sighed, reaching for his own phone. "Just try not to embarrass yourself too badly. I have enough to deal with today without having to manage your latest crisis." If only he knew what kind of crisis awaited him. Agnes left the bedroom without another word, descending to the kitchen where she prepared a cup of coffee. Not the cheap brand she usually drank to maintain appearances, but the premium reserve she kept hidden behind it. At 6:30 a.m. sharp, her private driver pulled up outside their building. Not the Uber Mark assumed she used, but James, her longtime employee who had played along with the charade for years. The sleek black Mercedes S-Class waited discreetly in the private garage, a far cry from the rideshare vehicles she normally pretended to take. "Good morning, madam," James said professionally as Agnes settled into the back seat. "Everything is prepared at the office." The drive to Apex Innovations headquarters was quiet, giving Agnes time to review the morning's carefully orchestrated sequence of events. Security teams were already in place, access cards had been selectively deactivated, and the board members were gathering in the private conference room on the top floor. They pulled into the private underground parking garage, a level Mark and his friends didn't even know existed. Sarah was waiting by the private elevator, tablet in hand, her usual efficient self. "Good morning, ma'am," she said, falling into step beside Agnes. Mr. Sterling arrived early as expected. He's in his office, preparing for what he thinks is his promotion announcement. Agnes nodded, a faint smile playing at her lips. "And the others?" David just pulled in, looking rather hungover from last night. "Clara's husband is already in his office, and we've confirmed Victoria has just left your apartment after a rather spirited conversation with Mr. Sterling's assistant." Agnes repressed a knowing smile. Victoria and Mark's assistant had never gotten along. The private elevator whisked them to the executive floor. Through the glass walls, Agnes could see Mark in his office, practically preening as he prepared for his imaginary promotion and takeover. He had already sent out subtle hints to his team about his upcoming advancement. "Security teams are in position," Sarah continued as they walked. "HR has the termination packets ready, and legal is standing by. The board members are waiting in the main conference room." Agnes checked her watch. 7:45 a.m. Right on schedule. "Sir," Sarah hesitated for a moment. "Mr. Sterling just texted Victoria about meeting for coffee before work. Should we let them?" "Let them," Agnes replied. "It's fitting they should have one last moment of perceived triumph before everything changes." Agnes spent the next hour in her private office, a space none of them knew existed, reviewing the final documentation. Each termination packet was meticulous, containing irrefutable evidence of their misconduct: Victoria's embezzlement, David's fraud, the leaked corporate secrets, Mark's indiscretions, and his attempts to usurp control. All of it carefully documented and legally verified. At 8:55 a.m., Sarah's voice came through the intercom. "Ma'am, they're all here. Mark and Victoria are having coffee in the break room. David is nursing a hangover in his office, and Clara's husband is on a call he thinks is confidential." "Perfect," Agnes replied. "Initiate lockdown protocols. No one enters or leaves without authorization." She stood, straightening her suit jacket. Years of preparation had led to this moment. Through the one-way glass of her office, she could see them all going about their morning routines, completely unaware that their world was about to shatter. "Send security to escort them to the main conference room," she instructed Sarah. "It's time." As she watched the security teams move into position, she thought about every snide comment, every mockery, every moment of humiliation she had endured. The mask of mediocrity she had worn for so long was about to come off, and the revelation would be spectacular. The clock struck 9 a.m. showtime. The main conference room at Apex Innovations was an impressive space, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the bustling Manila skyline. Now, at 9:05 a.m., it was about to become the stage for their downfall. Through the one-way glass of her private observation room, Agnes watched as security teams professionally but firmly escorted her soon-to-be former executives inside. Victoria entered first, her initial confidence faltering as she noticed the security detail. Her designer heels clicked against the marble floor, the sound sharp and nervous. "What's going on? I have a team meeting scheduled." Mark followed her, his face flushed with anger at being manhandled by security. "Do you know who I am?" I demand to speak to whoever's in charge of this ridiculous situation. David stumbled in, looking worse for wear, his hungover state making him more disheveled than usual. Clara's husband, Michael, brought up the rear, already sweating through his expensive shirt. They all took seats around the massive conference table, exchanging confused and increasingly worried glances. "This is outrageous," Victoria announced to the room. "I'm supposed to be in a promotion meeting right now. Where is HR? Where is the board?" Sarah entered silently, distributing sealed folders in front of each of them. Her face remained professionally neutral, though Agnes knew she'd been looking forward to this moment almost as much as she had. "What's this?" David asked, reaching for his folder with trembling hands. Before anyone could open them, the door opened one final time. Agnes stepped into the room. The silence was immediate and absolute. 4 pairs of eyes widened in recognition and disbelief. Mark's mouth fell open, his perfectly styled hair suddenly looking disheveled against his rapidly paling face. "Good morning," Agnes said calmly, moving to stand at the head of the table. "Please don't open those folders just yet. We have a few matters to discuss first." "Agnes?" Mark's voice cracked. "What is this? What are you doing here?" Agnes smiled, not the meek smile they were used to, but the confident expression of a CEO about to clean house. "I'm exactly where I belong, Mark. In my company, addressing my employees. Well, soon-to-be former employees." Victoria let out a sharp laugh, though it held a note of hysteria. "Your company? This is insane. You can't possibly—" "Apex Innovations," Agnes cut her off smoothly, "was founded by me 7 years ago. Every division, every project, every success you've claimed as your own was orchestrated by me. While you were all busy mocking my supposed failures, I was building this empire from the shadows." She pressed a button on the remote in her hand, and the wall behind her came to life with multiple screens. Each displayed damning evidence of their individual misdeeds. "Victoria Martinez," Agnes began, watching her face drain of color as spreadsheets detailing her embezzlement appeared on screen. "Over the past 2 years, you've stolen approximately $847,000 through falsified marketing expenses. Those spa weekends and designer shopping sprees weren't as well hidden as you thought." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but Agnes was already moving on. "Mark Sterling, creative accounting is one thing, but outright fraud and blatant attempts to take over a company you didn't build. The financial regulatory authorities will be particularly interested in how you've been manipulating our quarterly reports and diverting company funds." Mark slumped in his chair, his hangover forgotten in the face of his career's implosion. "Michael Roberts," Agnes turned to Clara's husband, who was now openly sweating through his expensive shirt, "selling corporate secrets to our competitors? Did you really think our security systems wouldn't catch those late-night emails, those encrypted messages?" Finally, Agnes turned to Mark, who sat rigid in his chair, his knuckles white against the armrest. "And you, Mark, where should I begin? The unauthorized sharing of confidential information, the abuse of company resources, or perhaps we should discuss your afternoon meetings with Ms. Dubois from our biggest competitor." The blood drained from his face. "How did you know?" "I know everything," Agnes finished for him. "Every mock, every insult, every betrayal. While you were all laughing at my supposed failures, I was documenting your actual ones." She gestured to the folders in front of them. "Inside these packets, you'll find your termination papers, along with comprehensive evidence of your misconduct. You're all being terminated for cause, effective immediately. Security will escort you to HR for processing and then off the premises." Victoria found her voice first, though it shook with rage and fear. "You can't do this. The board would never—" "The board," Agnes interrupted, "has already approved these terminations. In fact, they're watching this meeting via video conference." She gestured to another screen where the stern faces of board members were visible, watching the proceedings with grave expressions. "This is a joke," Mark stammered, though his voice held a note of desperation. "It has to be. You're nothing. You're nobody. You couldn't even what, Mark? Agnes challenged. Build a successful company? Manage a global enterprise? Lead an organization while you were busy playing the role of the visionary CEO? Every luxury you've enjoyed, every achievement you've claimed, it all came from the woman you thought was losing her mind? The room fell into stunned silence. Through the windows, the morning sun illuminated their shocked faces, casting harsh shadows on their crumbling world. Security will now escort you to HR, Agnes announced, pressing another button. The conference room doors opened and security teams entered. Your access cards have been deactivated, your emails suspended, and your personal belongings will be shipped to you after a thorough audit. As they were led out one by one, Agnes caught Mark's final glance, a mixture of horror, disbelief, and dawning comprehension. The man who had spent years mocking her supposed decline was finally seeing her for who she really was, and it was breaking him. As the others were escorted out, Agnes held up her hand to stop the security team from leading Mark away. Mr. Sterling will stay. We have personal matters to discuss. The guards nodded and closed the door, leaving Agnes alone with her former protégé for their final confrontation. Mark stood by the conference table, his usual poise shattered, his perfectly manicured hands gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white with tension. The morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the mix of fury and fear in his expression. "How long?" he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "How long have you been lying to me?" Agnes moved to stand by the window, looking out over the city she secretly owned. "Lying? Interesting choice of words, Mark. I simply let you see what you wanted to see. You were so convinced of my inadequacy, of my decline, that you never bothered to look deeper." "This is insane," he said, his voice rising. "You can't expect me to believe that you, the same woman who couldn't even—" "Couldn't even what?" Agnes cut him off sharply. "Land a major client? Secure a lucrative investment? Build something successful? Tell me, Mark, in all our years together, did you ever once ask me about my dreams beyond mocking them? Did you ever show genuine interest in anything I was doing?" He took a step back, thrown by the steel in her voice, a tone he'd never heard from her before. I built this with you. I was the public face. I supported you," he stammered. "You supported nothing," Agnes countered, her voice unwavering. "Every dollar you spent, every luxury you flaunted, every achievement you claimed, it all came from me. That CEO title you're so proud of? I created that position specifically to maintain my cover. The department you ran? I established it knowing you'd be perfect for the role. Ambitious enough to seem successful, but not curious enough to dig deeper." The color drained from his face as the implications began to sink in. "The penthouse?" he whispered. "Paid for in cash through one of my holding companies," Agnes confirmed. "The cars, the vacations, the jewelry, all of it funded by the woman you love to ridicule. Even that private investment fund you've been squirreling money away in, planning for your grand takeover, it's monitored by my financial team." He stumbled slightly, catching himself against the conference table. "How? Why would you do this?" "Originally, because I needed someone whose ambition and social climbing could help me build the right connections while staying in the shadows. Your network of corporate climbers became my perfect cover." Agnes paused, watching the realization dawn in his eyes. "But then you showed me who you really were." She pressed a button on her phone, and his voice filled the room from a recorded conversation. "It's not like your father was anybody important. Just a watchmaker who couldn't think bigger than his little shop." Mark flinched at his own words. "Agnes, That little watchmaker's shop provided the seed money for what became Apex Innovations," Agnes continued, her voice cold. "While you were mocking my father's legacy, you were standing in a building his sacrifice helped build. That was the day I knew this partnership would end exactly like this." Tears began to well in his eyes, but Agnes knew they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of humiliation and rage. So all of this was just revenge? You partnered with me just to… What? Teach me a lesson? No, Mark, I partnered with you because I saw an opportunity. You were so perfect, ambitious, social, completely self-absorbed. You never questioned where the money really came from, because you were too busy taking credit for it. Your friends never looked deeper because they were too busy following your lead. Agnes walked to the conference table and opened a new folder, spreading out papers across its polished surface. But let's talk about your own misconduct. The confidential information you've been sharing with Ms. Dubois, for instance. He froze. What? Your lover, Agnes clarified, watching his face pale further. Did you really think those hotel meetings were secret? That those encrypted messages were secure? I knew about every rendezvous, every conversation, every plan you made. You had me followed? His voice shook with indignation. I had everyone followed. It's my company, Mark. Nothing happens here without my knowledge. Agnes gestured to the papers on the table. These are termination and legal papers. You'll find the terms quite clear. You leave with nothing except what you brought into the company. Which, as we both know, was effectively nothing of true value. You can't do this, he whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I'll fight it. I'll tell everyone. Tell them what? Agnes asked calmly. That your aging business partner turns out to be the secret CEO of a global technology company? That while you were mocking her decline, she was building an empire? That every luxury you claimed credit for was actually provided by the woman you belittled? Go ahead. I'm sure it will make fascinating headlines. He slumped into a chair, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Why now? Why reveal all this today? Because the time for hiding is over. Apex Innovations is about to go public, and I'm done playing the role of the fading founder. You and your friends served your purpose, providing the perfect cover while I built something lasting. But now, she straightened her suit, now it's time for the truth. Security knocked on the door, right on schedule. Madam, the press is waiting in the main lobby for the announcement. Thank you, Agnes replied, gathering her papers. Mr. Sterling was just leaving. She turned to Mark one last time. Security will escort you out. Your personal belongings will be sent to your sister's house. Yes, I know that's where you've been planning to stay after this restructure. The irony is rather poetic, don't you think? As he was led away, Agnes caught her reflection in the window. No longer the meek, unsuccessful woman, but the CEO she had always been. It was time to show the world who Agnes Moreau really was. The press conference was a carefully orchestrated revelation. Standing at the podium in the main lobby of Apex Innovations, Agnes faced a sea of cameras and bewildered faces. The story had already begun spreading through the building like wildfire. The supposedly aging, out-of-touch founder of Apex Innovations was actually its visionary founder and CEO. For 7 years, Agnes began, her voice steady and confident, I've built Apex Innovations from the shadows, creating a company that has revolutionized global logistics and predictive analytics. Today, as we prepare for our public offering, it's time to step into the light. Reporters' hands shot up immediately, questions flying from all directions. The story was irresistible. A secret billionaire who had masqueraded as a fading figure while building a tech empire in the bustling heart of Manila. In the back of the room, Agnes could see some of her now former executives being escorted out, their faces ashen. Madam, is it true that your own business partner didn't know you owned the company? A reporter from a major financial publication called out. Yes, Agnes replied simply. Very few people knew my true identity. It was a strategic decision that allowed me to build Apex without the distractions of public attention and corporate maneuvering. Victoria was the last to leave, her designer handbag clutched to her chest like a shield. Their eyes met briefly across the lobby. The woman who had offered Agnes a ceremonial legacy advisor position just yesterday now understood the full magnitude of her mistake. Can you comment on the executive changes announced this morning? Another reporter asked. Apex Innovations is entering a new phase, Agnes answered diplomatically. And as we prepare for our IPO, we're making necessary leadership adjustments to ensure the company's continued success. Sarah appeared at her side, tablet in hand. Madam, the board would like to meet with you after the press conference, and the financial regulatory representatives have arrived to discuss the IPO timeline. Agnes nodded, scanning the room one final time. The employees gathered around the edges watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Many of them had seen her in the building before, assuming she was just another struggling consultant or low-level contractor. One last question, called out a reporter from a tech news outlet. What made you decide to maintain this deception for so long? Agnes paused, considering her words carefully. Success isn't always about who shouts the loudest. Sometimes, the most powerful position is the one nobody sees coming. As the press conference concluded, Agnes made her way back to her office, no longer hidden, but now prominently located on the top floor. The nameplate on the door read, Agnes Moreau, CEO, in elegant brushed steel. Inside, the views of the city seemed different somehow, clearer now that she no longer had to hide who she was. Sarah followed her in, closing the door behind her. The termination proceedings are complete. All access has been revoked, and their personal items are being packed under supervision. And Mark? Agnes asked, turning to look out over the city below. She could see him being escorted to his car, his arrogant swagger replaced by a defeated slouch. Victoria was already gone, probably calling every contact in her network, only to find that her reputation was already in tatters. Madam. Sarah hesitated. There's something else. Clara, Mark's former assistant, is in the lobby demanding to speak with you. She claims she had no idea about her husband's corporate espionage. Of course she didn't, Agnes replied. She was too busy offering me tips on basic coding to notice her husband was selling company secrets. The morning's events had sent shockwaves through the corporate world. Agnes's phone was flooded with messages from business leaders, investors, and media outlets, all wanting to know more about the secret billionaire who had hidden in plain sight. The board is waiting, Sarah reminded Agnes gently. She straightened her suit, ready to face the next challenge. The masks were off now, and there was work to be done. As she headed to the boardroom, employees stopped to stare, finally seeing her for who she really was. The whispers followed her down the corridor, not of mockery this time, but of respect, tinged with awe. The immediate aftermath of Agnes's revelation was exactly as she had planned. Swift, complete, and irreversible. The people who had spent years underestimating her now understood their mistake. But it was too late. She had built something they couldn't touch, couldn't diminish, couldn't mock. And this was just the beginning. 6 months had passed since the morning that shook Apex Innovations to its core. The company's IPO had been an unprecedented success, with stock prices soaring beyond even the most optimistic projections. The world, it seemed, was fascinated by both the company's technological innovations and the story of its secret CEO. Standing in her office on the top floor, Agnes looked out at the transformed landscape of Apex Innovations. The toxic culture that Mark, Victoria, and the others had fostered was gone, replaced by an environment of genuine innovation and collaboration. Employee satisfaction scores had risen by 78%, and productivity had reached all-time highs. Sarah entered with the morning briefing, her role now expanded to chief of staff. The quarterly reports are in, she announced, a hint of pride in her voice. Revenue is up 85% since the changes. The new executive team has exceeded all expectations. Agnes nodded, scanning the documents. After the mass terminations, she had promoted from within, elevating employees who had shown genuine talent and integrity despite the previous management's obstacles. People like the young female engineer Mark had ridiculed. She now led Apex's AI development department with remarkable success. And what of our former executives? Agnes asked, though she already knew the answers. Victoria attempted to start her own marketing consultancy, but her reputation preceded her. No major company will touch her, Sarah continued. Mark is facing multiple financial regulatory investigations, and Michael Roberts has been blacklisted from the industry due to the corporate espionage charges. And Mark himself? Agnes inquired. Sarah's lips curled slightly. He's struggling to find any meaningful employment. His attempts to launch new ventures have been met with skepticism, especially after the evidence of his misconduct became public record. The karmic justice was almost poetic. The same people who had once mockingly offered you ceremonial positions now couldn't even secure jobs for themselves. But the most significant changes were within Apex itself. The company had transformed from a successful but conventionally run corporation into a genuine industry leader. Their new transparency initiatives had become the gold standard in tech governance. The mentorship program Agnes established had already launched dozens of promising careers, including a robust program specifically for aspiring female leaders in tech. The Second Chance program has been particularly successful, Sarah noted, referring to Apex's initiative to rehire employees who had left due to the previous management's toxic behavior. Janet Moore, who quit after Victoria sabotaged her projects, is now heading our European division. The press had dubbed it the Apex Revolution, a complete reimagining of corporate culture. Business schools were already writing case studies about the transformation. But for Agnes, the real success was in the smaller moments. Seeing employees excited to come to work, watching innovations flourish without office politics getting in the way, hearing genuine laughter in the break room instead of cruel mockery. The charitable foundation is ready to launch, Sarah added, pulling up another report. Your father's name will be on the scholarship program for young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. This was perhaps the sweetest victory of all. The Moreau Legacy Foundation would provide opportunities to brilliant minds who, like her father, had big dreams but limited resources. Each scholarship would cover not just education but also seed money for startups. There's one more thing, Sarah said, her professional demeanor cracking slightly. Clara came by again. She's looking for any position. Said she'd even work in the mailroom. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Make sure she receives the same form letter we send all other applicants, Agnes replied. We'll keep her resume on file. Looking out over the city skyline, Agnes reflected on how much had changed. The secret CEO was now a regular on business magazine covers, but the power hadn't come from the revelation. It had come from the years of patient building, of quiet determination, of letting others underestimate her while she constructed something unshakable. The board meeting starts in 10 minutes, Sarah reminded her gently. They're eager to discuss the expansion plans. Agnes straightened her suit jacket, no longer playing a role, but simply being herself. The path forward was clear now, unobstructed by pretense or deception. Apex Innovations wasn't just surviving, it was thriving, proving that success built on genuine innovation and integrity would always outlast success built on arrogance and cruelty. As Agnes headed to the boardroom, she passed the wall of newly installed company values. At the top, in bold letters, was the phrase that had guided her through all those years of hiding. True power isn't in what you show, it's in what you build. The long-term impact of that revealing morning had exceeded even Agnes's expectations. It wasn't just about personal vindication anymore. It was about creating something lasting, something her father would have been proud of. The woman they had mocked hadn't just revealed her power. She had transformed an entire industry. 1 year after the revelation that changed everything, Agnes stood in the renovated lobby of Apex Innovations, preparing to unveil their latest innovation. The company had not just survived the upheaval, it had flourished beyond all expectations. But more importantly, it had become the kind of company her father would have admired, one built on integrity, innovation, and genuine value. As Agnes adjusted her suit before the presentation, she caught her reflection in the glass. No longer playing a role, no longer hiding behind a carefully constructed facade. The lessons of the past year had crystallized into something profound, something worth sharing with the world. Sarah approached with the final presentation notes, but her usual professional demeanor softened. Have you seen this morning's Wall Street Journal? She asked, handing Agnes the paper. The headline read, Apex Innovations named Most Innovative Company of the Year, the revolutionary leadership of Agnes Moreau. Agnes smiled, remembering a very different headline from a year ago. Secret billionaire CEO reveals identity, transforms tech industry. The media had been obsessed with the dramatic reveal, but they'd missed the real story. It wasn't about the deception or even the revenge. It was about the power of patient building, of quiet determination. "I ran into Mark last week," Sarah mentioned carefully. "He was at a small startup's recruitment event, trying to rebuild his career. He looked different. Humbled, maybe." Agnes nodded, feeling neither satisfaction nor regret. "And the others?" "Victoria's consulting business failed within months. David's legal troubles continue. Michael Roberts is working entry-level IT support in another state." Sarah paused. "They all tried to sell their stories to the media, but no one's interested anymore. The world has moved on." And so had Agnes. The past year had taught her that true success isn't measured in moments of triumph over others, but in creating something meaningful that outlasts personal victories. Apex Innovations had become more than just her revenge vehicle. It was a testament to what could be built when power was wielded with purpose rather than pride. Walking toward the auditorium where employees and press waited, Agnes passed the wall where they'd mounted her father's old watchmaker's shop sign. Below it was his favorite saying, "Success isn't about being seen, it's about seeing clearly." How right he had been. The company's transformation hadn't just been about removing toxic leadership, it had been about fostering an environment where innovation thrived because people felt valued. The same employees who had once walked on eggshells now confidently pitched ideas that were revolutionizing their industry. "It's time, madam," Sarah said softly. Before stepping onto the stage, Agnes thought about all those dinners where she'd sat quietly, absorbing their mockery. The patience that they had mistaken for weakness had been her great strength. While they focused on appearing powerful, she had focused on building power. While they chased validation, she had pursued vision. The auditorium was packed. Faces, both familiar and new, turned expectantly toward the stage. These weren't just employees anymore, they were partners in building something extraordinary. The culture of fear and manipulation that Mark and his cronies had fostered was gone, replaced by genuine collaboration and innovation. "Success," Agnes began her speech, "isn't about who you appear to be. It's about who you truly are, and what you choose to build." The words carried the weight of experience, of lessons learned through years of careful planning and patient execution. Looking out over the crowd, Agnes saw the truth that Mark and his friends had never understood. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. It builds quietly, grows steadily, and reveals itself not through words, but through impact. The woman they had mocked hadn't just been hiding her success. She had been learning the most valuable lesson of all, that true victory isn't in the moment of revelation, but in the legacy you create. Apex Innovations wasn't just her revenge, it had become her redemption, her father's vindication, and a testament to the power of patient, purposeful building. As Agnes concluded her speech, and the audience rose in applause, she knew that the story of the secret CEO would fade, but what they had built would endure. In the end, that was the greatest revenge of all, not the destruction of those who had wronged her, but the creation of something they could never diminish or deny. The power had never been in the secret she kept, but in the truth she had always known. Success built on integrity, however quiet, will always outlast success built on arrogance, however loud. 2 years had now passed since Agnes Moreau stepped out of the shadows, and Apex Innovations continued its meteoric rise. Yet, with unparalleled success came new frontiers, and sometimes unexpected storms. The Apex Revolution had indeed become a case study, attracting not just admirers but also fierce competitors, eager to replicate its unique blend of technological brilliance and ethical governance. One such challenge came in the form of Kronos Logistics, a heavily funded, aggressive startup led by a former Silicon Valley wunderkind. Kronos began systematically poaching Apex's mid-level talent, offering exorbitant salaries and promising a return to a more results-driven, less sentimental corporate culture, a thinly veiled jab at Agnes's emphasis on employee well-being, and a subtle attempt to reintroduce the very toxicity she had purged. Agnes, however, was no stranger to corporate warfare. Instead of engaging in a bidding war for talent, she doubled down on Apex's internal development programs and mentorship initiatives. She publicly announced a significant increase in Apex's profit-sharing scheme, ensuring that the company's success truly trickled down to every employee. Furthermore, she launched Project Phoenix, an ambitious internal initiative that gave every employee, regardless of their role, the opportunity to pitch innovative ideas directly to her executive team. This wasn't about public relations. It was about fostering an undeniable sense of ownership and purpose. The result was not only a halt in the talent drain, but a renewed surge of creativity within Apex. Employees felt valued, their voices heard, and their contributions genuinely impactful, something no amount of external poaching could undermine. Beyond the corporate battlefield, Agnes found herself increasingly drawn to the philanthropic endeavors envisioned by her father. The Moreau Legacy Foundation, initially focused on tech scholarships, began expanding its reach. Agnes personally oversaw the establishment of community innovation hubs in underserved areas across the Philippines, providing free access to cutting-edge technology, coding boot camps, and mentorship programs for aspiring entrepreneurs. She spent more time at these centers than at high-profile industry events, finding profound fulfillment in seeing young minds, just like her own once was, brimming with ideas but lacking resources, finally get their chance. Her public appearances shifted from grand corporate announcements to humble conversations with students, often sharing her own story of starting from scratch, emphasizing perseverance over quick wins. The media, initially fascinated by the secret billionaire narrative, slowly began to grasp the depth of her vision. Articles started appearing that focused less on her dramatic reveal and more on her genuine commitment to building a more equitable tech landscape. She faced scrutiny, of course. Some critics accused her of soft capitalism, suggesting her social initiatives were just a clever marketing ploy. Others, particularly from the old guard, struggled to comprehend a leader who prioritized purpose as much as profit. But Agnes remained unswayed. Her father's words echoed in her mind. Build something so solid that no one can tear it down. This extended beyond technology to the very fabric of society she aimed to uplift. During this period, Agnes also subtly reshaped her personal life, shedding the last vestiges of the charade she once lived. The opulent penthouse, while still her home, became less a symbol of lavish success and more a functional space for quiet contemplation and occasional, intimate gatherings with her new, genuine circle of trust. Sarah, her chief of staff, had become an indispensable confidant, her loyalty unwavering and her understanding of Agnes's vision profound. The few friends she now kept were those who saw beyond her wealth and title, valuing her for her intellect and her quiet resolve. She found peace in solitary moments, in reading, in long walks by the Manila Bay, and in nurturing a burgeoning passion for abstract art, a stark contrast to the rigid, numbers-driven world she commanded by day. The freedom to simply be Agnes Moreau, unburdened by pretense, was a luxury more valuable than any material possession. 3 years after the revelation, Agnes Moreau stood on a stage not of corporate grandeur, but of a newly completed, state-of-the-art tech vocational school, funded entirely by the Moreau Legacy Foundation, in a rural province outside of Metro Manila. The sun beat down, warm and bright, on the faces of hundreds of eager students, their families, and local community leaders. This was her legacy taking root, far from the polished boardrooms and the competitive glare of the global tech industry. Apex Innovations, under her clear and unwavering leadership, had cemented its position as a global leader, not just in technology, but in corporate responsibility. Their transparent supply chain solutions were now mandated by several national governments, and their ethical AI guidelines had become an industry benchmark. They had proven that immense profitability and profound social impact were not mutually exclusive but symbiotic. Revenues continued to climb, employee retention was unprecedented, and their stock remained a darling of ethical investment funds. Agnes, now well into her 60s, possessed an aura of quiet power that was palpable. Her silver hair remained impeccably styled, but her eyes, though still sharp and perceptive, held a softness born of profound satisfaction. She carried herself not with the guarded posture of a woman hiding a secret, but with the open confidence of someone living her truth. Mark, Victoria, and the others were distant memories, occasional footnotes in the annals of corporate misconduct, their names now synonymous with cautionary tales in business ethics courses. Their attempts to re-enter the professional world had consistently failed, their reputations irrevocably tarnished. Their loud arrogance had indeed been outlasted by Agnes's quiet integrity. During her speech, Agnes spoke not of market share or quarterly earnings, but of potential, of access, and of the transformative power of education. She recalled her father's humble watch shop, the meticulous care he put into every gear, every spring, teaching her that true value was in the precision of the build, not the grandness of the display. "He built silently," she told the captivated audience, her voice clear and resonant. "He taught me that the most enduring power comes from laying a solid foundation, brick by painstaking brick, and trusting that what you build with purpose will stand the test of time, long after the noise of fleeting triumphs fades." After the ceremony, as she walked through the bustling classrooms, observing students hunched over keyboards, their faces alight with discovery, Agnes felt a culmination of her journey. It wasn't about the revenge anymore. That had been a necessary cathartic step to reclaim her narrative and her company. The true victory lay in this. In creating an ecosystem where genuine talent thrived, where integrity was the currency, and where future generations, unburdened by the cynicism and greed she had once faced, could reach their full potential. She paused by a large mural painted by the students, depicting a towering, vibrant tree with deep roots, its branches reaching for the sky. Below it, in bold, confident strokes, was painted, "Built on purpose, grows with integrity, stands forever." Agnes smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. The secret CEO had built an empire, yes, but more importantly, she had built a legacy. A legacy that proved, undeniably, that true power was never about who you appeared to be, but about who you truly were, and what enduring good you chose to create. And that, in the quiet strength of its existence, was the most profound triumph of all. 4 years after the watershed moment, Agnes Moreau's journey had transcended the bounds of corporate success and personal vindication to become a testament to enduring purpose. Apex Innovations, under her stewardship, was not merely a tech giant. It was a global benchmark for ethical innovation, its quarterly reports routinely showcasing record profits alongside groundbreaking social impact initiatives. The company's expansion into new markets, particularly in underserved regions, was driven not by conquest, but by a genuine desire to uplift communities through technology and education. Agnes herself had become a quiet icon. Her image graced the covers of prestigious business magazines, not for dramatic exposés, but for insightful features on sustainable growth and conscious leadership. She often joked that she finally understood the true meaning of retirement, not as a cessation of work, but as the freedom to dedicate her boundless energy to endeavors that truly mattered. Her days were a tapestry woven with strategic board meetings for Apex, hands-on visits to the Moreau Legacy Foundation's burgeoning network of schools and innovation hubs, and quiet evenings, immersed in classical music or philosophical texts. The contrast with her past antagonists remained stark. Mark Sterling, as Sarah occasionally reported, had become a cautionary tale in business ethics circles, his name synonymous with fleeting ambition and ultimate downfall. His attempts to re-enter the corporate world had been met with a resounding wall of skepticism, his carefully cultivated network having evaporated with his reputation. Victoria Martinez found herself unable to secure meaningful employment, her once glittering career having dimmed into obscurity. Michael Roberts, after facing legal repercussions for corporate espionage, had retreated into a life of anonymity in a different country. Their stories served as grim reminders that power built on deceit and arrogance was, ultimately, a fragile illusion. For Agnes, the initial satisfaction of their downfall had long since mellowed into a detached observation. Her focus had shifted entirely to building, creating, and nurturing. The joy she found in witnessing a young student at a Moreau Legacy school grasp a complex coding concept, or seeing a nascent startup flourish under Apex's mentorship program, far eclipsed any lingering resentment from the past. Her life, once defined by a meticulously constructed charade, was now authentically her own, built on the foundations of integrity and a profound commitment to leaving a meaningful mark on the world. 5 years had passed. The Manila skyline had changed, new towers rising. But Apex Innovations stood as a beacon, its headquarters a symbol of innovation and its impact reaching far beyond its physical footprint. Agnes, now embracing the wisdom and freedom that came with her years, had slowly begun transitioning the day-to-day leadership of Apex to a hand-picked team of brilliant and ethically driven executives, with Sarah at the helm as the new CEO. Agnes retained her role as chairperson of the board, focusing her considerable energy on long-term strategy and, more increasingly, on the global expansion of the Moreau Legacy Foundation. The foundation was now a force unto itself, funding educational initiatives, clean energy projects, and sustainable agriculture programs in developing nations. Agnes often traveled to these remote communities, her presence a quiet inspiration. She preferred direct engagement over grand pronouncements, finding authenticity in the dusty roads and the hopeful faces of those whose lives were genuinely being transformed. In these moments, far from the corporate spotlight, she felt closest to her father's spirit, his unwavering belief in the power of diligent, purposeful work. Her personal life, once cloaked in secrecy, had found a serene rhythm. She cherished her friendships, deepened through shared values and mutual respect. She cultivated her garden, finding joy in the quiet miracle of growth. She continued her studies in philosophy, delving into ancient wisdom that reinforced her conviction about the fleeting nature of external validation versus the enduring power of inner peace and meaningful contribution. Occasionally, a new journalist or documentary filmmaker would seek her out, eager to unearth new details about the secret CEO. Agnes would grant interviews, not for personal glorification, but to share the core message that had defined her journey. True power isn't in what you show, but in what you build. She emphasized that success, when pursued with integrity, creates a ripple effect of positive change that far outlasts any single individual or any fleeting moment of triumph. The story, once a tale of betrayal and revenge, had matured into a narrative of redemption, transformation, and enduring legacy. Agnes Moreau had not only proven her detractors wrong, she had reshaped an industry and sown the seeds for a future where purpose was as paramount as profit. Her silence, once mistaken for weakness, had been the fertile ground upon which an empire of integrity had flourished, forever altering the landscape of business and reminding the world that the most profound victories are often built quietly, patiently, and with unwavering conviction.